I have the pleasure to welcome some of my Atos colleagues and our partners from the Deutsche Gesellschaft für internationale Zusammenarbeit, GIZ, to our Global Accessibility Awareness Day event. We are going to hear from Tanja Gönner, Paul Hosters, and my colleagues Udo Liedtke and Alexandra Knuppe. Now, before we go there, let me ask you a question. Have you ever thought about how climate change impacts people with disabilities and older people, and if there is something we can do about it? There are 1.3 billion people with disabilities globally. We speak about at least 15% of the world's population. This makes people with disabilities the largest minority on this planet. But is it really a minority, considering that everyone could be affected by a disability at some point in their lives, even if it's temporarily? Studies show most disabilities are acquired as people age. And thanks to medical progress, we as a society are getting older and older. Sadly, still today, people with disabilities and elderly people are largely left behind when it comes to climate crisis, mitigation of climate risks, and migration and adaptation to environments impacted by climate change. These vulnerable people are living in some of the most fragile and conflict-affected countries and are often disproportionately affected. The United Nations Refugee Agency talks about climate change and disaster displacement. These groups of people are also called climate refugees. Rapid urbanization with inaccessible infrastructure and transport systems, and the lack of inclusive disaster risk reduction measures, also called DRR, further increase their vulnerabilities. In short, there is a need for inclusive climate change actions. Digital transformations offers new opportunities in this area, like smart cities. We believe that here, as well as anywhere, digital technologies need to play their part in building a future where everyone is included and where we don't need to leave anyone behind. Now, I'll let my colleague Udo Liedtke, our Germany CEO and responsible for public sector and defense in our region, Central Europe, and Alexandra Knuppe, who is the head group of corporate social responsibility, tell you more about it. Udo and Alexandra, welcome.
Hello, dear colleagues. My name is Udo Liedtke. I'm the CEO of Atos here in Germany and responsible for the public sector and defense industry in our region, Atos Central Europe. Through both my roles within Atos as well as personally, I firmly believe that it is important to create equal opportunities for everyone, regardless of an impairment or personal disability. I'm also convinced that information technology, and digitalization in particular, can make a significant contribution to creating accessibility. This is true both internally, in the way we work with our own colleagues, as well as externally. Based on this fundamental belief, we started a new chapter in our partnership with the Deutsche Gesellschaft für internationale Zusammenarbeit. In 2021, we launched the ICT for Inclusion Challenge, focusing on supporting innovative digital solutions for inclusive education in Africa. The first edition of the ICT for Inclusion Challenge has been a big success. The joint efforts of GIZ and Atos for inclusive education in Africa created a broad awareness and recognition from international partners and organizations. Based on last year's achievements, I'm proud that we will again join forces with the GIZ for a new edition of the ICT for Inclusion Challenge. This year we focus on India, and we will foster digital solutions that mitigate the impact of climate change on people with disabilities and elderly people. Because still today, plans to reduce the risks of climate-related disaster rarely consider the needs of people with disabilities and elderly people. And this is something we would like to address together with the new edition of the challenge. For us at Atos, actions against climate change are at the heart of what we do. This is represented in our decarbonization strategy and portfolio. So we, as well as our clients, can act preventively. Every day we see how urgently we need solutions to help deal with the effects of climate change. I'm really looking forward to learning more about the digital concepts the challenge will foster. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Udo. My name is Alexandra Knuppe, and I'm the head of Group Corporate Social Responsibility for Atos. Atos is a worldwide provider in digital transformation, solutions and pioneer in digital decarbonization. This year's ICT for Inclusion Challenge is centered in mitigating the impact of climate change on people with disabilities and elderly people in India. And this theme combines 3 pillars of Atos' raison d'être, or statement of purpose, which provides a trusted digital space, tackling climate change, contributing to scientific and technological excellence. So as the environment and the fight against climate change is very important for Atos, let me explain a little bit more on Atos' approach for decarbonization. As a leader in digital transformation, we focus on digital for good. We are really convinced that digital can make an important contribution to a more sustainable world. Atos is conscious of the role we can play, and therefore we initiated an ambitious environment program already 12 years ago. We continue to fight against climate change now and in the future using our digital strengths.
Thank you. Now let's hear it on Tanja Gönner's own words. She is the CEO and Chair of the Management Board of die Deutsche Gesellschaft für internationale Zusammenarbeit, GAAD. Bitte schön.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Tanja Gönner. I am the chair of the management board of the Deutsche Gesellschaft für internationale Zusammenarbeit, or GIZ in short. We are a federal enterprise and a global service provider and support the German government in the field of international cooperation for sustainable development. Our 25,000 employees in more than 120 countries worldwide shape a future worth living for all. The Sustainable Development Goals are at the heart of our action. More and more we see that accessibility of physical and increasingly digital spaces is a necessity to ensure that over 1.3 billion persons with disabilities worldwide are not left behind. That is why GIZ and our main commissioning partner, the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, take this issue very seriously. We understand the inclusion of persons with disabilities not only as a moral and legal obligation, but believe that universal design of digital solutions benefits everyone. Yet, there is still a long way to go to ensure that digital innovations are accessible for all. Working in an inclusive and accessible way is not only the right thing to do, but also beneficial from an economic point of view. To further expand digital inclusion and accessibility within GIZ and in our programs worldwide, we need strong partners with first-class expertise. Partners who share the same goals and values when it comes to sustainability and inclusion. That is why, dear Mr. Udo Littke, I am delighted that Atos and GIZ are continuing their successful cooperation in this area. Last year at the GAAD 2021, we announced our collaboration here. Now, less than 12 months later, thanks to our dedicated colleagues from Atos, GIZ and BMZ's Make IT Alliance, we have brought this cooperation to amazing life. Together, we have launched many great cooperation projects in the areas of digital skills, digital accessibility learning courses, climate smart and sustainable cities, and support for tech startups. Atos and GIZ successfully carried out the first ICT for Inclusion Challenge in 2021 to drive innovative digital solutions for inclusive education in Africa. We look back on over 200 applications from more than 37 countries rated by a panel of experts from around the world and a great response by the international community. I am proud to announce that this year we will again join forces for the ICT for Inclusion Challenge with the aim of mitigating the impact of climate change on people with disabilities in India. As you know for sure, Persons with disabilities are among those most affected by the impacts of climate change and extreme weather events. Unfortunately, most of the existing adaptation and mitigation measures to address the negative impacts of climate change do not include persons with disabilities or older people. This needs to change. That is why this year we are looking for innovative digital solutions for inclusive climate action and disability-inclusive disaster risk reduction, so that persons with disabilities are no longer left behind. It is in this spirit that I am pleased to announce the launch of our joint ICT for Inclusion Challenge India Edition 2022 by Atos and GIZ. Let us all work together to make this world a better place. I wish you all a happy and fruitful GAAD 2022. Goodbye, and in German, auf Wiedersehen.
Thank you. Now, Paul Hosters, Advisor Global Project Disability Inclusion at the Deutsche Gesellschaft für internationale Zusammenarbeit, is going to present us further details on the new ICT for Inclusion Challenge edition this year. Welcome, Paul.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Beatrice. It's a pleasure to be here at the Global Accessibility Awareness Day. I know Atos is making a huge event every year, and I think it's super important to highlight the importance of accessibility, and especially that it in the end really benefits everybody. So let me introduce myself. Beatrice said it. My name is Paul Hosters. I work as an advisor for the GIZ. I think it was explained before what that means. So I work in the GIZ Global Project on disability inclusion, and my specific field of expertise is the intersection of digital development, that is digital transformation happening worldwide, and then disability inclusion. And we work in countries around the world to ensure that disability inclusion is part of international and German development cooperation. So the title of today's event is the announcement of our new challenge of the Atos GIZ ICT for Inclusion Challenge India 2022. Let me quickly lead you through what I will be talking about. So first of all, a small introduction. I think we heard what GIZ is. However, I'll drop a few words also about what we do in the field of disability inclusion in our global project. Before then, I head over to a small review of last year's Innovation Challenge, which focused on Afrika and on inclusive education. And then finally, I give an outlook of what's going to happen this year. I guess you all are curious to hear. Okay, so we at GIZ work worldwide for a future worth living. We try to come up with global solutions for sustainable development. We have more than 50 years of experience as an international service provider. We do that mostly for the federal government of Germany, for our ministry, but we do that also for EU institutions and in some cases UN institutions. Obviously, we are obliged and committed towards the Sustainable Development Goals and the Agenda 2030. Many of you might be familiar with the goals outlined there. Disability inclusion is mentioned in some of them, not in all of them. However, we believe that this is a cross-cutting issue, and I think it's pretty much condensed also in the science sector that the Sustainable Development Goals cannot be reached without taking disability inclusion serious. In our project, we try to live inclusion as a matter of course, which is our vision. We try to follow the overarching SDG principle of leaving no one behind. We believe that disability is not inability, but that the society as a whole can benefit from disability inclusion. And our mandate is to make German development cooperation inclusive. And yeah, we try to do that by promoting universal design and participation through our projects. Now, I think what I didn't do at the beginning, what I'm going to do it now is give a short introduction of myself. I mean, the visual introduction for those people with visual impairment. So I'm a middle-aged man with blonde hair and a light beard and a white shirt. And what we see on the slide right now is an old man with a white beard and a suit. And his name is Vincent Cerf. Before I talk about last year's challenge and this year's challenge, I might start with a little anecdote about Vince Cerf. So I think it was in the early 90s when he tried to communicate with his deaf wife. he had problems doing that over the phone, so he came up with the first prototype of what is now known as an email. So I think it's a very good example how barriers experienced by persons with disabilities can be a trigger for innovation. And that is also the narrative that we are trying to establish through our work in the field of disability inclusion and innovation, which I'm gonna talk more about now. So this is the banner of our last year's challenge. The slogan being Shaping Inclusive Education for People with Disabilities, the ICT for Inclusion Challenge Africa. It's a cooperation project of GAAD, Atos, and the MakeIT Alliance. The idea was really in the sector of tech startup promotion to bring in the issue of disability inclusion and to show that disability inclusion can be something that triggers innovation. And to do that in Africa, and we consulted civil society before and got to know that inclusive education really is the one main barrier for disability inclusion experienced by many people there. And so we said we want to tackle this issue. And it was a huge success. We had over 200 submissions from people from 37 countries in Africa. We had 10 teams that were selected by a jury for a support program, which was a virtual boot camp. We had almost half of the participants were women. All were working directly with the disability community, and we had more than 25,000 clicks of our challenge website. I think this was really a great success last year. So now we want to build on that success, continue this cooperation with our great partner Atos, which is so nice to host us here today. For our next innovation challenge, which is going to start this year, we will focus on mitigating the impact of climate change on people with disabilities. We will focus regionally on India. And I think it's a really interesting topic because we see that for a lot of the adaptation strategies, for a lot of the disaster risk reduction, people with disabilities are not considered throughout the process. So we think that we need to take care of this people with disabilities as a marginalized group, which usually suffer more from the impact of climate change. And we believe that we can find digital solutions, technical solutions to overcome this adverse impact that climate change has on the lives of persons with disabilities. So what you see there is our new banner. Okay, so what do we aim to do with this new challenge? So first of all, we want to raise awareness of the issue of inclusive climate action and disability inclusive disaster risk reduction, because we think it's not yet on the table so far in that strength. Also, we want to identify, promote, and test innovative digital solutions for inclusive climate change adaptation and mitigation, also in the area of disaster risk reduction. Then we want to work with the winners, support them through mentoring, networking, and then in the end, they're also going to get financial prizes. For the steps, how are we going to do it? So first of all, we're going to have an application phase. We're going to disseminate a call for application. Everyone here in the audience is very welcome to forward this as well to his or her networks. In the second phase, we're going to have a pre-selection round where we check whether the solutions actually meet our entrance criteria. Then we're going to do selection interviews with a number of the best rated teams to see a little bit more about their solutions, their professionalism, and so forth. Then the selected solutions will enter the ICT for Inclusion India Accelerator Program, will be able to pitch their solutions in front of a high-ranking jury, and then finally we will award the winners at the International Day of Persons with Disabilities in December. I think that is the general outline. I like this topic a lot because I think it's really a novel approach. For an example, if you look in the area of inclusive disaster risk reduction, you see a lot of the early warning systems are not accessible yet. So this is really a matter of how to provide better information for persons with disabilities. But then we can also imagine totally new approaches to foster disability inclusion in the context of climate action. It was a pleasure speaking to you today. And I'd like to thank you. And if you have any questions, feel very free to reach out to disability@giz.de.
Thank you, Paul. As we've heard today, we need to foster inclusive digital solutions to mitigate the impact of climate change on people with disabilities and older people. This challenge gives us an opportunity to source and scale innovative solutions and raise the global awareness of climate change with the support of all types of stakeholders. We'd like to pave the way to address the risks posed to people with disabilities as an ethical and economical imperative. So let me ask you once again, have you ever thought about how climate change impacts people with disabilities and elderly people? And if there is something you can do about it, do you have a working prototype or a ready solution centered on how to mitigate the impact of climate change on people with disabilities or older people? Yes? Then stay tuned not to miss our launch of the ICT for Inclusion Challenge India edition this June, so that you can submit your innovations. You can follow Atos and die Gesellschaft für internationale Zusammenarbeit on social media channels and save the ICT for Inclusion Challenge.org website to your favorites to be among the first to apply to the ICT for Inclusion Challenge India edition 2022. We are very much looking forward to finding out more about your innovation. Thank you.